Origami is the art of folding a flat piece of paper, transforming it into a three-dimensional form. Ensuring that the form will be aesthetically pleasing or performs a suitable purpose requires some planning and an understanding of the effects that certain techniques have on paper.
Paper is made by drying a mass of fibrous material such that it holds together. Good paper for origami will maintain folds to preserve structural integrity. Paper has properties such as color, thickness, weight, flexibility, and cohesiveness. Folds can be made to one or more layers of paper at the same time. Several folds can also be made simultaneously. Folds can be unfolded and refolded in a technique known as pre-creasing, or they can be used to guide the positions at which other folds are made. In such cases, the unfolded section of paper has no bearing on the final outcome of the form. There are only two types of fold that can occur with straight edges. A fold where the edge moves inwards either side of the paper is called a valley fold, and a mountain fold is where the edge projects outwards above the paper sides. Sometimes it is possible to make folds that are independent of the order in which they are performed. The most popular size for a piece of paper is A4. This is used in photocopying machines and in computer printers. A4 paper offers the property that when it is halved into two A5 pieces of paper, each paper length and width is proportional to those of the original sheet. An A4 sheet of paper also maintains the proportionality of an A3 sheet. Consequently, these types of paper can be used to enlarge and reduce the size of images. Origami can start with pieces of paper of different shapes, but the most common shape is a square. To create a square piece of paper, an A4 piece of paper can be folded such that the smaller edge of the paper lies along the longer edge of the paper. The excess paper can then be cut off or torn off after using the fingernails to make a crease in the paper. Popular themes for origami include animals, plants, and containers. It is possible to make many different forms from the same piece of paper, and instructions for these are available in books or on the internet. Instructions to models that require a large number of folds are often difficult to understand, so it is advised that simpler forms are constructed to begin with. Many sets of instructions require folds initially made in the same sequence to form a base upon which other folds are performed. The water bomb base is made by folding into a rectangle, then pre-creasing to a square and squash folding on both sides. The preliminary base is made by folding into a triangle and pre-creasing into smaller triangle, then squash folding into squares. Pre-creasing a square piece of paper can fold either of these bases. The base for simple animals are two corners folded into the center. The flaps are then folded inwards. The model is flipped over and the folded over pieces of paper are once again folded into the center. A fish base uses folds into the center, then a fold in half to create a pentagon with a pocket at front. Each side of this pocket is squash folded and then the back folded down. It may also be prepared by creating two rabbit ears from the start. Which method of creation used may depend on the speed of the actions. Frog base builds on preliminary base. Each flap is squashed flat into the center and folded over. A petal fold is then performed on all four sides. The bird base also builds on the preliminary base. Petal folds are made on either side. Stretched bird base held each side and stretched, folded over and points moved together. A finished form can be described in terms of primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structure. The primary structure is the shape of the paper, its coloring and patterns on the paper. If you draw on the paper after it is folded, and then unfold the paper, you will note the positions of the marks that were made. The secondary structure is the fold positions in the paper, and the order in which they are folded. Tertiary structure is the degree to which folds are made, whether the fold presses one part of the paper against another part of the paper. Quaternary structure is when more than one piece of paper is used in constructing the final form. I created a number of different origami animals and have categorized them by the fold sequences that it takes to construct them. A diagram may be created called a cladogram, based on the clades of animals involved. All of the animals start from the same primary structure of a blank square paper, even though each is colored differently. After each base is constructed, the instructions deviate, and consequently individual animals branch off from these bases. The folds towards the end of the production are generally for limbs and other appendages. The position of these folds is left to the artist's best judgment of the aesthetics of lengths. Folding a longer crane's head will result in a shorter neck. These individual differences are slight, and the product is still classed as a crane.
There are various instructions for constructing animals, and it is possible to construct something which will resemble an elephant from both a fish base and from a simple animal base. These would be classed as different animals according to my cladogram. There are other ways of arranging the animals, such as symmetry, segmentation, hard or soft bodies, pairs of appendages, and evidence of internal systems such as mouths or eyes. Using these arrangements, a completely different classification system can be prepared from the one which I have detailed. Complexity increases the further down the key, and at each stage a difference of construction or function separates animal cohorts, finally individualizing animals.
Some instructions for animals create models which are not ideal for display. An origami dog that I made had too much weight in its head and would consequently fall over when stood up. This is related to the center of gravity of the model and the location of the support for that weight. Such an origami animal would not survive in the wild because all the other animals will eat it. A crane with a head that is too small will not be attractive to other cranes with large heads, and consequently it will die of loneliness. Origami instructions which are too complex for an origami folder to understand will not become popular with artists, and the instructions will come into disuse and never be attempted. I wanted to create a crane that I could ride, so I had to scale up the size of the paper used to produce it. A piece of paper 21 centimeters by 21 centimeters produces a crane with a back of 3 centimeters in length. My behind is about 30 centimeters long, so multiplying all dimensions by 10, the paper to produce the crane will need to be 2.1 meters by 2.1 meters. An A3 piece of paper is 42 centimeters by 29.8 centimeters. So I stuck together 35 pieces of A3 paper with some sticky tape to create paper the size required. After the design was complete, it still did not have the structural integrity required to carry me, so I created a four-legged cloth seat that I placed inside the crane's cloaca and unfolded.
Some origami is created to be a representation of animals which we are familiar with. The instructions which are used are more difficult depending on how detailed the final product will be. With experience, the folds used on one model can be used to create your own forms. The complexity and diverseness of the art form is worth classifying, and the survival of popular and uncomplex structures contemplated.